Hi friends, it's me, Catherine Endy, the Family Life Coach, and today I want to talk with you about kids and big feelings and whether or not you get triggered when your kid has big feelings. And let's start by talking about what do I mean by big feelings. I like to use this term big feelings because I think that it's really important not to judge or give sort of a value judgment to any kind of emotion that a person experiences. So we tend to sort of think about negative emotion and positive emotion. We think of sadness and anger and frustration as sort of in the negative category, and happiness and ease and joy in the positive category. But if we accept the notion that all feelings are part of the human experience, then we can kind of take a step back and not put a judgment on them and just let all feelings be what they are. And the truth is, some kids have really big happy emotions that can be kind of intense, and some kids have, sort of smaller negative emotions. So I want to talk about big feelings because those tend to be the things that are really triggering to us. And in fact, some kids get really excited, and that can make some parents really anxious. So I want to know from you in the comments, do you sometimes get triggered by your kid's big feelings? When your kid goes into, for example, emotional upset or extreme excitement, and they get really high energy or they get really intense, is that triggering for you? Is that difficult for you? And if so, what do you do about it? And one of the things that I think is really important to recognize is, do you kind of go down with the ship, right? So like, say your child gets really disappointed and crying and sobbing and maybe really frustrated because they didn't get something that they wanted. Do you kind of jump into the emotional spiral, unintentionally of course, but in an effort to help them, do you sometimes get kind of caught in the emotional spiral and go down with them and get frustrated and yell and get angry and maybe send them to a timeout or something like that? Or are you able to really hold space for their big feelings and support them and validate and reflect what their experience is without getting caught in the spiral? So I really want to know from you which of those, I'm sure it's sometimes one or the other, but do you tend to be a person who gets triggered and swept up in the emotional spiral of your kids' big feelings, or do you have strategies for staying calm and regulated? And this is really a huge part of the work that I do, and it's a huge part of the research that I do, is about emotion regulation in adults, because I was actually very surprised to find when I started doing research on and looking in the literature on emotion regulation in parenting, most of what I found was actually about emotion regulation in kids. And of course, that's because the early childhood years are a time when we want to be teaching about emotion regulation, and we really want kids to be able to regulate their emotions. However, as you know from some of our talks about brain development, children don't have the ability in terms of their brain development to regulate their emotions yet. And so it really, for me as a researcher, the bigger question is, how do adults regulate their emotions, and how does that affect children? How does adult emotion regulation affect parenting stress and a parent's ability to manage their own stress? So these are some of the big kind of theoretical things that I'm like nerd out on all the time. But in a practical sense, I also incorporate this work into my coaching and teaching with parents of young children, because I think this is really pivotal. It's really key to enhancing the parent-child relationship and focusing in on what really matters, which is the ability to talk about and regulate one's emotions. So there are a lot of wonderful strategies for how adults can do this. Mindfulness, breathing exercises, looking at past trauma, even just the simple step of examining what those triggers might be for you. So if your child does a certain behavior and that always is consistently triggering for you, what's that about? Can you look sort of into your own experience and your own past and identify, was there a time when that happened to you, or that situation happened in your family and you were punished or you were yelled at or something like this? helping yourself to identify what those triggers are is really, really powerful for just kind of starting to untangle some of that stuff. And I think you'll find that if you simply go through the act of just identifying, like, what are those things, and bring some awareness to it, and awareness is a mindfulness tool, bring some awareness to it, that helps you to be able to kind of circumnavigate that issue in the future and avoid those power struggles with your kid over something that's really more about you than it is about them. And I think that's a really key point, is that so often we get swept up in things emotionally, we blame our child, or we kind of take it out on them, when the truth is, like, we're the ones who have the problem, not our child. See you soon.